Ole Miss nailed the John David Baker hire potentially, but here are some other names that you need to know in this coaching search. We're going to be joined by Dalen Flowers. It's the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media and a former Ole Miss staff member as well. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen, and please give us a like, subscribe, and a comment on your way out. Come check out a second listen on the network. Nearly every team, college and pro, is available. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. We are going to be joined by Dalen Flowers. Dalen, one thing that's interesting about this is John David Baker got hired to be the 2026 offensive coordinator. We heard about Kelvin Bolden coming back, but also some names to know that you need to pay attention to. Michael Spurlock for either coaching outside or inside wide receivers, and Mike Stoops for linebackers are two names you need to potentially know.
Yeah, Pete Golden is he's really hit the head over the last week and a half, 2 weeks, and he's really done a successful job. I think in terms of a standpoint of getting some of the guys like John David Baker and Kevin Bolden back here, and of course some of the names you just named like Mike Stoops are important to realize from a recruiting standpoint for me in terms of they've been here, they understand the system that Pete Golden wants to run, and they also have a great correlation in recruiting in the state of Mississippi. When you're a coach and when you're a recruiting coordinator, wherever your home state is, that's where it starts for you. And you want to be able to obtain those home state guys and obtain those guys in a prominent manner where you're able to have time efficiently to go into other states and recruit those states properly as well. Pete Golden had a game plan. This has been an unprecedented time for himself and for Ole Miss in general. But I think Keith Carter really put the nail in the coffin with this move because he understood the totality that was needed to continue to move in this program in the direction that it was going in. And hiring Pete Golding allowed him to do that, but it also allowed him to do it in a manner that he understood the totality of Pete Golding. Pete Golding has a true passion for Ole Miss. He has a true love for this school, and he's hiring guys, and he's interested in hiring guys that will also show the same love and passion to not only make this a successful program, but build the university, build the city of Oxford, and build the national brand that is Ole Miss.
Yeah, that was interesting. The name that I heard whenever they mentioned Mike Stoops, that obviously there's no connection with Ole Miss there other than the fact that he's a respected name at linebackers and he has some head coaching experience. But Mike Stoops and Brian Brown combining for the defensive coordinator and Pete like being the head man, that sounds like potentially a direction that we might be going.
Yeah, I think as well what Pete has been able to do so far, but as well, I think which makes successful programs is developing young groups in terms of getting young guys in your staff, but also keeping the grit and grind edge for having some old guys, a little bit older guys that have been through the ranks as head coaches, that have been through, experiences through all of college football and even the NFL sometimes. That gives the landscape of also understanding to how to properly move with NIL and transfer portal and how to, relate with these young guys, but as well keeping the edge of understanding how to build work ethic and understanding how to build a physical mentality to allow guys to play through the SEC and throughout the college football playoff. I think Pete Golden really has understood the magnitude of getting some guys like this back, but also being interested in other guys like Mike Stoops. Because when you're recruiting, you have to be able to pitch something to someone in an effective manner. And Mike Stoops has that experience as being a head coach, but he also has the understanding of what Pete Golden wants to do. I really believe what Pete Golden has done over the last 2 weeks has been, outstanding. He's really taken this moment not as something that has really just been passing him, but it's something that he really deserved and really worked for. And it's funny because this unprecedented time for him was kind of thrown onto him in a matter that he probably wouldn't even expect if his life depended on it. But he's really taken this moment over the last 2 weeks, Stephen, and he's really just grabbed it and ran with it. And you have to give much props to what he's been able to do recently, and as well the magnitude he's doing it in. He really stood out and with me in terms of just a week ago he was calling off his first ever presser with the media and basically saying the focus needs to be on these players. And the last few weeks, few days has not been on the focus of an 11-1 football team that has really worked their behinds off to get to this moment. And he's given that moment through words, and words really go far with recruiting guys and also getting coaches here to really elevate your program in the future.
All right, for people that's tuning in, if you leave a comment, please put where you're commenting from. In the third segment, that is all going to be you. Dalen's probably going to be out of here, but I'll do the best I can in the comment section. We'll do that in the third part of the show. The other interesting thing that came out was the Kelvin Bolden news, him coming back on the staff. He was basically, I'm not going to say vilified, but he was victimized, I guess, when he went to LSU. And that was the whole narrative that Bolden did this, Bolden did that, all of that stuff. But it turns out it was as simple as a breakup with Lane, because as soon as Lane got to LSU, he was going the other direction.
Yeah, relationships matter in this coaching carousel and in the world of football. And and obviously I don't know the inside depths of the relationship between Kelvin Bolden and Lane Kiffin, but he left Oxford this past offseason for a reason to go to LSU. And it's like you just said, Lane Kiffin goes to LSU, and here comes Kelvin Bolden. I think this is a huge hire for Ole Miss and for Pete Golden. I think this speaks volumes in terms of what they're able to do in the future. When Kelvin was here, he did a fantastic job as a part of the recruiting coordinator team. And I really won't be surprised if his role is a little bit more elevated here at Ole Miss once that confirmation of his role gets confirmed. But I think he has the ability to do really great things. He recruited really good guys at Ole Miss, understands the state of Mississippi and where to attack and how to get guys to Oxford and keep them there. But this is also a guy that has continued to make a resume out of himself. Kevin Bolden has definitely created a lot of national narratives for himself in a positive light in terms of being able to go to LSU, be the assistant GM, and make a name for himself. That speaks volumes. And Pete Golding understood what he needed to do to continue building this program in the future. Ole Miss had a fantastic, ending to National Signing Day, and keeping some guys at Ole Miss, but also acquiring some guys from other schools to kind of sign for Ole Miss, including Jace Matthews. So Kellen Bolden is a really big hire. It's a shocking kind of, piece of news for me to get this morning. I really, really wasn't expecting that to happen, but I think that speaks on the volumes of the relationships that Pete Golding has built with, staff members over time, including John David Baker, who's coming back as well.
Yeah, one thing that's interesting about the coaches, you have the John David Baker thing, which honestly it was funny because he was rumored to go to South Carolina and they announced Kendall Briles. And this morning they announced at Virginia Tech, where he was rumored to go, they announced the Penn State guy. And it was like, well, there's kind of one place left. And sure enough, like 15 minutes later, they announced him. I think it's interesting because I've heard, like I said, rumors about Michael Spurlock, and they didn't know if it was inside wide receiver or outside wide receiver on that case. Obviously, rumors about Mike Stoops, not Mark, not Bob, Mike. One of the Stoops brothers at linebacker, that would make sense. But that still leaves the open tight end position that is going to be something somebody can get. In my opinion on that is find somebody that is more of a recruiter willing to take that role and be an on-field coach. That would be the place that if you hire a Frank Wilson, if he's available, that's where you put him.
Mm-hmm. Can I throw a name out for you who's never been a coach, but I think will be a fan favorite of a lot of people in the Ole Miss world?
Mike Espy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You read my mind, my friend. I think that I don't know where I would rank him in terms of if I was a head coach like Pete Golding in terms of guys on my first, radar to call. But I think Mike Epsy has a great advantage of, player relationships, and like you just kind of talked about, being on the field and being a great recruiter and being able to understand the totality of this new age of college football and what goes into wanting guys and getting guys committed to a school and keeping them there as well, which is also a vital part. But being able to dialect the relationships between players and coaches is very, very important for guys that want to come into a program. Whether or not they're going to be able to play a lot, if they have that relationship with that coach, they know that if they continue working, if they continue learning, if they continue asking questions, then in some form or manner that their time will come. And I think that Mike Epsy will be able to kind of bring that if, that conversation was being asked from Pete Golding. I'm not necessarily saying that's going to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's a name thrown out. And I actually will kind of advocate for him to be thrown out in a way as well.
All right. So we are going to take a little break. When we come back, we'll have one more segment with Dalen. And after that, it's going to be all you. Be sure and put where you're commenting from. We want your comments. But Dalen Flowers talking about Ole Miss football. We're coming back right after this. All right. All right, let's talk about Omaha Steaks. The holidays come with two big goals: feeding people well and finding gifts they'll actually love. And whether you want both handled in one move, Omaha Steaks is the way to go. From hosting to gifting, they deliver the world's best steak experience right to your door because during their Sizzle All the Way sale, you can stock up and save in a huge way, 50% site wide at Omaha Steaks. And it gets even better. Locked On College listeners will get an extra $35 off with the promo code COLLEGE at checkout. I love how easy it is to gift. Shows up frozen, packed beautifully, ready to cook. Steaks are perfectly aged and insanely tender. It's restaurant level at home. Save big with gourmet gifts and more on holiday favorites with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site wide during their Sizzle All the Way sale. And for an extra $35 off, use the promo code COLLEGE at checkout. Terms apply. See site for details. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code COLLEGE. Do us a favor, like, subscribe, and comment on the video. Subscribe to the podcast on whichever audio podcatcher you're listening to and give it a 5-star review. It costs nothing, but it helps keep everything free. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live for your team every day. Now take the time to level up and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Ole Miss with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 per month or $50 per year. Go to lockedonolemess.supercast.com or check the link down in the show notes to learn more. All right, so Dalen, one thing that is interesting, the same people that told me about the potential coaches said that practice today was the most energetic it has been in over a month. The players were feeling it. They were walking around. A lot of that had to do with them getting healthy because of the nicked up. But you have to think the playoffs had something to do with that as well.
Yeah, I think that for me personally, I know there were a lot of talks after the head coaching change and a lot of the off-field narratives going around that a lot of the national media kind of believed that Ole Miss didn't belong in the playoffs because they would be distracted, et cetera, et cetera. But for me personally, this entire time, I just genuinely thought this was just going to light a fire in these players. I thought this was going to elevate them to, build moments where they maybe have never even seen before, build confidence in themselves that maybe they hadn't had before, and it's really evident right now because of the staff that is here and the belief that these players have in one another. This is a team that, regardless of who's the coach, regardless of what's going on the outside, that wholeheartedly believes they can compete and win a national championship this year, and they should. They've displayed it in a high manner this year. They've come together as a team in a way that outside of the field have really built on great relationships. These are guys that are connected. This is a team that is a family, and they've continued to uplift one another behind closed doors. Speaking to players that I know throughout the time over the last few weeks, these guys have not allowed this outside noise to distract them. The main goal is to win a national championship and bring the first ever national championship back to Ole Miss since the 60s. So these players understand the magnitude. They have continued to stay motivated, to understand the totality hand, to get ready to face a very talented Tulane team, but also they understand the magnitude of Pete Golden being their head coach and how important that would be and how monumental that would be to get him a national championship in this kind of early stage of his head coaching career.
And just so everybody knows, tomorrow morning is my reaction to the John David Baker thing. We're not ignoring it just to ignore it. Tomorrow we have a full show on tomorrow morning airing about him. And I'm curious to see, like, if they're bouncing around and all of that, what if what we saw in November was a distracted team? What if the first time you've seen a team that was truly locked in when they step on the field against Tulane?
And I've said this throughout the season, but I think that this team, honestly, in ways, has not even shown their full potential. I think that the defense still has kind of some lapses that they can work on. I think the offense has struggled to, kind of monument certain moments and certain play calls in the red zones at times throughout the season. I think when this team is fully on their P's and Q's from the X's and O's standpoint, from the accountability standpoint, from the learning from their coaches and trusting the play call standpoint, that this team is one of a kind, and this team can compete with any other team in the country to win a national championship. And I wholeheartedly believe that. I think that you look at the resume, you look at the record this year. The one loss for this Ole Miss team this year was on the road to Sanford Stadium by one possession, and that a few defensive plays, a tackle on 4th and 2, maybe a few kind of on throws accuracies in the late fourth quarter changed the landscape of that game. This team has talented players from the top to bottom, and these are guys that really are understanding the totality of the college football playoff right now, but also understanding how important it would be to Oxford and to the community. I think that also builds into lighting the fire for some of these players that have been here through the ranks and been here through the trenches, that have waited for this moment, waited for this magnitude of a time. These are guys that really are willing to and ready to showcase their talents on a national stage, and there's no better time to do it in the college football playoffs.
All right, Dalen, we will let you go to whatever event you're covering or going to or whatever you got going on, but we appreciate you stopping by, man.
Appreciate you having me as always, my friends. Take care.
All right, take care, man. All right, Dalen Flowers from the Rebel Walk and an Ole Miss, Locked On Ole Miss contributor. When we come back, it is your comments. We will get into the chat and see what is up. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994, and with 48 teams, for the first time ever, it's going to be absolutely massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets, that's the hardest part. That is why the Game Time app is so clutch. They finally give the fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. You pull up the app, and the layout makes it so simple to scroll through the matchups and compare seat views. Pick a game, tap a section, and you have your tickets locked in within minutes. No confusion, no hunting for fine print. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets in every match, concert, and event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. All right. All right, let's get into the chat and see what is going on. Gary Grizzard says, what about the strength and conditioning coach? Haven't heard a name there yet. I'm sure something will pop up soon. You have to think that whoever gets hired is from that Tommy Moffitt tree, just because he was at Alabama for so long and kind of familiar with the Scott Cochrans and all of that. So somebody from that potential tree, I would imagine. Somebody says, so Charlie Weiss is not going to stay. No, he's going to leave. That was always a possibility. And Ole Miss got an excellent hire. They got a really good hire. That's fantastic. Jeff Sessions says John David Baker is the best hire in Ole Miss history. Jeff Sessions from Gulf Breeze, Florida. I don't know if he's the best hire in Ole Miss history, but he's a very, very good hire. I call it a grand slam, honestly. It's a grand slam hire. Javon Campbell says, why did Kelvin Bolden and Austin Thomas leave in the first place? They fell out with Lane Kiffin. And that lets you know that whenever Lane Kiffin got down there, they both got gone, essentially. So it's that. Mary Ronaldin says, Hottie Toddy from William and Mary in New Orleans, Louisiana. David Clark says, we don't need Junior after our run. That there's a factual case for that. It's okay if he goes. You're going to have somebody that runs the same stuff similarly. Same system, same that. It's kind of the system that Nick Saban put into where you kind of keep doing the same thing over and over again. You just find another coach to do your stuff. And there might be little tweaks, but the bones of it's exactly the same. And that'll happen with John David Baker and Ole Miss. So we'll see exactly how that goes. Living in SIP, I disagree with allowing the other offensive assistant coaches to return to coach. They weren't trying very hard to do so. That's not true. That's not true. You can't blame an assistant coach the way you blame a head coach. Lane Kiffin walked in the office and said, you got to be on the plane with me or you don't have a job. So it's either be unemployed with families or you do the safe thing. Keith Carter, Pete Golding said there was no doubt of all the guys coming back. They probably negotiated with it. Lane Kiffin lost the PR war. This isn't a way for him to gain some favor back. The point is, Ole Miss is going to have a full staff, essentially, which is exactly what they needed for the national playoffs. And next year, they're going to pick and choose where those different spots are. But I do not agree with people that are upset about it, seriously. Bobby Patrick says, though there are a lot of really great hires so far, excited to see how they gel next season after we finish up winning the Natty this year. Hotty toddy. Exactly. Moncrief is recruiting for us. Could he move over to wide receiver staff? He could, and he obviously has the credentials to do that. It's not going to be a situation to where he's out of his element or over his head. I mean, he's got all the training in that, but the question is, how good of a recruiter is he? Now, Ole Miss got a 5-star flip in Jace Matthews in 3 days, and a lot of that was Dante Moncrief. If he's doing that, I don't know if you want him on the field worrying about game plan stuff and you want him trying to worry about recruiting. I mean, we'll see what it looks like, but I'm sure Dante could do it. But the question is, do you want him to do it? And we'll see exactly how that goes. Michael Sprague says, go Rebs. Jackson Hurley from Kennesaw, Georgia. Great news on JDB. What is left to hire for, and who should we have to start to watch? Fins up. We talked about Michael Spurlock. We don't know if that's inside or outside wide receivers. Could be either one. I've heard Mike Stoops as somebody as a potential linebackers coach for the 2026 team, possibly even for this team, honestly, with Chris Kiffin going away. And those are big. I've heard the rumors that you've heard on like the Ole Miss Spirit and all those other podcasts talking about Austin Thomas potentially back for GM, but I disagree that it's very important that you get a GM in place because you have Walker Jones and Matt McLaughlin within an office doing the GM role right now. So they know exactly what's going on. They know where the money's allocated, all of that stuff. So you can take your time hiring the right GM. I still think Mike Kershaw, who recruited Pete Golding to Delta State, has a chance to be on the staff in some capacity. He's currently at Kennesaw State. Those are some names that I've heard through the grapevine. Obviously, the Derek Nix stuff, we'll see exactly how that goes. The Frank Wilson stuff, we'll see how that goes. It all depends on Kevin Smith, but they're in good shape as far as names that are interested for the job that is opening, if that makes sense. Brent Wills says, I love the Baker hire. He'll contribute nicely to continuity of the offense. I was really hoping Pete would rehire Arnett as defensive coordinator, but he let State beat us out. It's going to be a defense similar to what he calls right now. Arnett doesn't call that defense. Arnett's a 3-man, a 3-3 stack, a Jolie Dunn defensive coordinator. That's not Pete Golding. That's not what he does. And you're going to hire a defensive coordinator that kind of does what you do, the way your vision for this team is. And I would be willing to bet, considering all these players have been recruited for that system, that Pete sees this team running what he runs. We'll see. Elmer, hotty toddy, we're so proud of our players. They're the best, and going all the way with Pete at the helm and the assistants. Gail Hanna says, from Olive Branch, rumors are out there that Caden Priestcorn will be coming on board. Any truth to it? I heard that on one of the podcasts today. I did hear that on one of the podcasts. They might have it. I don't have it. Somebody else might have it. It makes sense. Caden Priestcorn is tweeting about this whole search very good, a lot, essentially. So it wouldn't surprise me if he came on. But it would be for a graduate assistant or an analyst or something like that. But it'll be interesting to see, honestly. Gary Bullock from Faulkner, Mississippi. John David Baker is a lot better hire than most I've heard. Just need a tight end coach and turn Pete loose. Hotty toddy. TTK Trace from Senatobia, Mississippi, an awesome hire in John David Baker. I have no doubt that we will still be one of the best offenses in the country with him. Yeah, he was one of the best offenses in the country at East Carolina, and they don't have near the dudes that we have. So it's interesting. Brett Wells also says, also, will we know which players are leaving when the January portal window opens, or can they enter after the Natty is won? Presumptuous, but I believe, because I picked this 11-1 finish before the season, you have 5 days after your last game in the playoffs to get into the portal. So it's not like January 2nd through the 16th and that's it. If you're still playing, you have 5 days after the game to enter the portal. Let's see. Javon Campbell, what about defensive coordinator? Brian Brown, I think, is the defensive coordinator right now, and they're looking for a co-defensive coordinator, essentially. So they're always going to do the co-thing on defense, but I think Brian Brown's going to move up a little bit. And maybe it's Mike Stoops. Maybe Mike Stoops is in the booth and Brian Brown's still on the sideline and the defense looks remarkably similar, but it kind of is what it is. A name to also consider for tight ends coach is J.D. Hess, former tight end of Baker, and has been on the staff as an analyst for a few years now. Young and can relate to recruits. Yeah, possibly, maybe, potentially. I have not heard that name. Elijah Dossett, do you believe Pete has any defensive aces up his sleeve for Georgia? I hope so. They played the drop 8 stuff that they tried against LSU, and Georgia just ran it down their throat. I hope you realize how physical that game is going to be. If you play the Georgia Bulldogs, you better pack a lunch. That's going to be a physical football game. And the defense for Georgia is going to come out and really try and play well because you had them. You were at the point where you should have beat Georgia. So we'll see how it goes, honestly. Elijah Dossett, how many 4- or 5-star players has Ole Miss recruited this year so far? No, they got Jace Matthews and 7 4-stars or something like that. And that's with the craziness that happened with the staff. I don't know about the 2027s yet. We're going to talk with David Johnson over the next couple of days about recruiting in Mississippi as well. David, Brandon, proud of how the administration and players handled the last month. Yeah, they were all rock stars. They honestly were. Yes, I'm Josh says, with the hire of Baker, do you believe the Derek Nick ship has sailed? He was never a candidate to be the offensive coordinator. Never. So he would have to be a wide receivers coach or something like that. I think he's going to try and be an OC at Memphis. And I think there's a chance he becomes an OC at Southern Miss if Hugh Freeze gets that job, because Hugh Freeze is absolutely campaigning for the Southern Mississippi job. And honestly, he can probably get the Southern Mississippi job because with the amount of money they have, that you can't do much. Mark Covington says here from Pontotoc, Mississippi, every day are here, HYDR, hotty toddy. Let's make a run, Rebs. Pretty good road in the playoffs. Yeah, I think it's a pretty good schedule, if we're going to be honest. Juwan Campbell, what will be some of the Ole Miss portal needs? That is one of those things that we need to see who leaves first. Because what I think the portal need is right now, like safety right now, they need to go find a safety. They just need a safety. The corners, they're going to be all coming back. They're pretty good at corner. They need safety. Linebacker probably as well. They need to find the next Andrew Jones or Chris Pupal, need to find the next one of them. I think they're pretty good on the defensive line. I think a tackle would be a big get for them. Because they're losing both Diego Pounds and Jaden Williams. And we have to see what happens at running back and at quarterback and at the wide receiver position. I mean, you have to pay attention to all of that. So once we see what happens, we'll know exactly what Ole Miss needs. And finally, have the game day colors been announced? Yeah, it's a red game. It's wear red, and that will be taken care of. Anyway, thanks for tuning into this live edition of Locked On Ole Miss. Tomorrow morning show, John David Baker. We react to it. We get all excited for it. And we talk about what John David Baker has done and where this Ole Miss team could go. Make sure you subscribe and follow the show to get all the latest episodes. And we are on all of the social channels, so check that out as well. And also, did Locked On make your Spotify Wrapped? Prove it on social media for a free month of our brand new Everydayers Club. Just tag our National Locked On Network account on any social platform, and we'll drop you the code. Be one of the first to join the Everydayer Club to get your favorite show ad-free and exclusive access to the members-only Discord channel. For those of you on video, we're going to send you on over to the college football show, and on audio, make sure you find your second listen and make the college football Locked On College Football your second listen. So hotty toddy, everybody. And we're about 2 weeks away from the biggest college football game in Mississippi history. And that will never not be cool to think about. Anyway, hotty toddy, everybody. We'll see you later.